This is the Kitchen Sink WP Podcast, episode 310.
I program my own computer.
We have a server crash, 404 error, page not found, links aren't working, system is crashing, system is crashing, system is crashing.
Your old HTML website, barely alive. We have the technology. We have WordPress. A new website, better than it was before. Better, stronger,
Faster. We have the technology. The technology.
Why, hello everybody, this is Adam Silver, the host of the Kitchen Sink WP podcast. Thanks for being here. Let's get started. All right, upcoming events. There are two WordCamps coming up. We have WordCamp Phoenix, Arizona, February 7th and 8th, and WordCamp Glasgow, February 8th, a single-day camp. All right, moving on, segment one in the news. Two things here. One is notice that I saw a notice over on Twitter about FacetWP, which I'm a big fan of. They let you sort and organize data really in a cool way, so you can do sliders and based on price. Or if you ever go to like a car dealership website and you want to pick make, model, year, and price, that's that live integration. Anyway, so FacetWP, they are updating to 3.5 coming out pretty soon here, and they have some new requirements they want people to know about. The requirements are PHP 5.6 or greater, WordPress 4.9 or greater, and ACF, Advanced to Custom Fields 5.0 or greater. All right, also in the news, my friend Josepha Hayden shared some information last week that over back on Community Manager Advancement Day 2020, our mutual friend Andrea Middleton has won the Community Industry Award for her work with the WordPress project. So that's pretty cool. I wanted to mention that as well. So congratulations to Andrea Middleton. She's awesome, one of my favorite people, and so is Josepha, actually. Josepha is now the executive director of the WordPress project. Andrea Middleton is part of the community team, works for Automatic. Pretty cool stuff all around. All right, moving on to segment two, the meat potatoes of this week's episode. This week, I have an interview for you. I spoke with Francesca Marano. She's out of Italy. She works for SiteGround, which is really cool. Her story is awesome. She does a ton of community work. Take a listen here, and I'll come back with the tip and tool of the week after the interview with Francesca. All right, here you go. This week, I am joined by Francesca Marano. Francesca is the WordPress community manager at SiteGround. She was the release co-lead for WordPress 5.3, where she served as the project coordinator. And apparently, Beyonce is always the answer, which I'm questionable about that. We'll talk about that. Welcome to the show, Francesca. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.
I enjoy our conversations
and
when we meet in person.
Absolutely. And of course, I'm going to try it again because I didn't hit record last time. I'm honest about it to my audience. So good afternoon in Italian is buon pomeriggio?
Buon pomeriggio.
Pomeriggio.
Yes.
I need the extra syllable in there. Okay.
So in
pomeriggio.
Italian, when we want to stress a sound out, we will put two consonants together. So actually, pomeriggio is with two G's.
Two G's, right.
And then it's pomeriggio and not pomeriggio.
Pomeriggio. Okay, so good afternoon
This
to
is
you.
something very difficult for non-Italian speakers to grasp.
Yeah. So for those who don't realize it or don't now kind of realize it, you are in Italy. I am in North Carolina. So
Yes.
So the time shift is there, but we've met before, and I always like to tell the audience how I know my guest. In this case, all I can remember is we've met in the WordPress community, though I don't know when the first time was.
I do remember.
Do you know when was the
I
first time in
do.
person? When did we meet?
In person, we met the first time at WordCamp Miami in 2018.
Okay.
We sat at lunch completely randomly together with a bunch of people. I remember Alain Schlesser was there.
Oh yeah.
Carol was there. Maybe Felix Arns was there. I think it was kind of a European group, and you sat down with us, or maybe we joined you.
Yeah.
This I can't remember. And so that's the first time we met in person.
Right, that makes sense, and that's right. Then now it's coming. It's harder to remember. We go to so many camps.
Of course.
It's like, how do you meet people? I always feel bad when someone says, "Hey, good to see you." I'm thinking, "Hey," and I don't remember the person.
Hey.
Because
No, what is very, very weird is how many deep conversations we have with people that you've never met in person, and then you met in person, and it's always so awkward because you're like, I've been talking to this person online for years. What do I do? Do I go for a hug?
Right.
Do I just, play it cool? Oh, hi. And, it's
Right. It's crazy. Yeah. But now we know how and when. You remember, which is good. I thank you for the memory. I do remember that now. We were also both on a panel together last year at WordCamp Phoenix, where we spoke about community. We'll talk about that again a little bit later, but that was cool, you know.
Yeah.
So for those who don't know who you are, though, why don't you tell the audience who you are, how you got into WordPress. So what's the story? How did you get here, kind of thing?
I got here like most good things in life by mistake. No, kidding. But a little bit by chance. I didn't think of having a career in tech, despite both my parents being developers since the 60s.
Wow, I didn't know that.
As they were called at the time. I was doing other work. I was an administrative manager for a company. And I always played with computers because I was one of the, lucky kids that had a personal computer very early on when it wasn't really a thing because of my dad's job. But I never really imagined myself working in that. I never really liked development. I had to take some classes. I failed miserably. That's not how my brain works. It's not my logic. It's not my thing. But then I decided to open a blog. And I took some HTML class way back, probably when it was HTML 3.1, maybe. And then I opened the blog, and then I wanted to change some colors. So I started playing around with HTML and CSS. And at some point, it was more interesting to play around with WordPress than it was writing the blog. Incredibly, people noticed me changing things in my blog, and they started asking me if I could do the same for them. And I couldn't actually believe that people were asking me for this, but one thing led to another. So in a few years, I decided to sell my services. And then I started building websites, and I had no idea that there was a WordPress community out there, because in Italy it was not really developed, despite Italy being one of the first countries to have a WordCamp when they were just born. It kind of fizzled down a little bit over the years. So when I started using WordPress a lot, there was not really an organized community. And this is where the chance part comes. I met someone that was involved with the WordPress community at a completely non-WordPress event, and they told me, "Why don't you contribute to WordPress?" I'm like, "What can I do? I'm terrible at coding. I am, passable as HTML and CSS, right. So I'm not exactly." And I was like, "No, but there are teams that do translations, community." And I started with translations, and then I met Andrea Middleton at the first WordCamp US in Philadelphia, and there I felt I found home, basically. And so I started contributing to WordPress, to the community team, more actively. Italy didn't have a community at the time, so it was also very exciting to be able to contribute to the start of that with a group of people that really gave so much to the Italian community, and so I was lucky to get to be part of that. I continued then working on community, and at one point I was like, well, I enjoy this a lot more than tweaking HTML and CSS. Right. And SiteGround at the same time, and I met the people of SiteGround, of course, at events around Europe and Italy. And exactly when it really is a serendipity sometimes in life, because I was at this point where I was like, okay, I had my business for 6 years. I am at this point where if I want to grow, I either hire someone or I skill up. Mm-hmm. And the skilling up for me was learning JavaScript, which I resent as a language that is making the web a lot less accessible than it should be. So I was like, skill up, not really interested. Hiring someone, I tried and it didn't go very well. So I was really looking around and I was like, maybe I should do this, maybe I should do that. And I saw the SiteGround job ad, and I was like, okay, I'm going to reply. Why not? And I got the job. So I started working on community, both the WordPress community and the community of the SiteGround users in September of 2017.
Interesting.
So that was, that's how it went from having a mommy blog to leading a core release, because that's how life goes.
Right. And we're going to get to that core release in a minute. So, what you may not know is, so before that, so 2014, 2015, SiteGround reached out to me along with another host to see about kind of doing what you're doing now.
Yeah.
But it was so early in the WordPress community space to be like an evangelist or to be an ambassador that they couldn't, a lot of companies couldn't figure out a way to justify the expense.
Yeah.
And especially the expense for being in the States as a job, traveling. And now it makes total sense. So, I had conversations with SiteGround, I had conversations with another host, and I was honest. I was like, I was looking for something like that.
Yeah.
But the timing and the budget wasn't there because, again, lifestyle, not that I'm living like a rock star, but I have a family and kids,
Of course.
and I lived in Los Angeles at the time. So.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, I think the community in this sense evolved a lot. So we do have now a structured SiteGround Ambassadors program, but I tell you, and it was started about February 2018. And we were, in February 2018, we started talking about it and thinking about it and putting together the scope and everything. And at the time, there were already people that were representing companies, but it was not so transparent and open. And we were actually, I think, if not the first, definitely one of the first companies to come out with, a program and saying who the people that were in the program were and what more or less, were our expectation, their expectations. And since then, I've seen a lot of companies, and not only hosting companies, but a lot of companies inside the WordPress ecosystem, working with evangelists and pastors. And I think it's wonderful. So if you think about it, in less than 2 years, that also changed completely.
Oh, it did. Yeah. I mean, literally when I was in those conversations, the other company, the other host, doesn't matter who it is, they're still around, but they sponsored me. They covered my travel because it also was a gray area. Like, could they pay for stuff? Could they not pay because of the nonprofit status? So what they would do is they paid for my travel to a camp that they were sponsoring and I was speaking at. So that way, when I was there, I could then do social media for them and hand out swag because it made sense. But they got in a little bit of trouble when they tried to have me do those things when they weren't sponsoring. And I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't add their name to my slide deck because I'm not an employee.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't hand out swag because if they're not a sponsor, and let's say SiteGround is a sponsor there. And by the way, this is not SiteGround in the past has sponsored the show, so thank you for that, but that's not about this. But, if SiteGround or any other hosting company is paying to be a sponsor at a WordCamp, and then somebody else comes in and starts handing stuff out, not a sponsor, it's not fair to the actual sponsors. So I'm really keen to that. I want to make sure that everyone's fair. It needs to be above board.
Yeah. So for us, it was also very important, and I still am. Although, thank God, someone else is taking over, and not thank God because I didn't like being the team representative, but because I really believe that there should be a turnover of people, and so. I've been the community team global representative for almost 3 years now. So first of all, SiteGround is a company that has always been very involved with the community. So they would never do something that it's against the rules. And then especially, you have the community team representative on one side. And then, so it was very important for us to create the whole thing and do it in the most transparent way and really put together that, I don't know, they will listen and they will be mad at me, but probably we could also get more out of the people that were sponsored, but it just doesn't feel right.
Right.
Because it's not how the WordPress community works. And, if you have ambassadors that are in other industries and where events have other rules, then you can also do things differently. But it's very important. The WordPress ecosystem has some very clear unwritten rules,
Right,
right?
right.
Some of them are written and they're very easy to abide. How do you say
Yeah,
abide?
yeah,
Yeah.
abide by.
Some are unwritten, but are nonetheless very clear, and you don't want to do something
Yeah, I mean,
against those because it sucks.
yeah, there are companies, as you know, there are other companies out there who have made big mistakes in the way they've approached sponsoring things. Like they take the chance and they get reprimanded from not just community but also from foundation for sponsoring big camps,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. And it happens because it's unwritten and because, well, they thought it was a loophole. But nonetheless, I want to ask you also about community. So I think you and I are both on the same page about community. It's important to us. It's kind of, we found our place in the WordPress
definitely.
space. I mean, you're not a developer. I'm not a pure developer. I know enough to be dangerous. I run a small agency now. I have the podcast for 5.5 years. It's important, and it's always interesting because I ask people this all the time. How did you get into it? And everyone's like, always WordPress by accident. Well, it makes sense because it's only 16, 17 years old this year, right? So it hasn't been around for 50 years. So, but the community always is a secondary aspect.
I think that unless you're coming to the software because you're a developer
Right.
and you want to fix a bug that is stopping you from doing your job, I think everyone else kind of stumbled into the WordPress community somehow. And I never stopped being amazed by the variety of different stories and how people get involved and, where they take their involvement to other aspects of their life.
Right.
And it might be getting a job. So, for example, for me, so obviously English is not my native language, as you can tell also from my heavy Italian accent. So, for example, until I started contributing to WordPress, English was a language that I used on holiday, that I used to read blogs and books, but that was it. I didn't really need to express myself in English, written or spoken. So for me, for example, the value that I also took home in this specific area is immense. I would never be able to have the proficiency of English that I have today if I didn't start contributing to WordPress.
Interesting.
Or remote work. Remote work is something that in Italy is not as popular as in, I would say, the US or the UK. So, for example, contributing to WordPress and having to communicate with people that are from all over the world, just in a written form, where you lose what basically is the most important aspect of communication, non-verbal communication,
right.
and you have to translate that into writing is extremely challenging and extremely interesting, and it can really help you a lot in so many things in life. I sometimes find, if I have to mediate with my son, for example, on something, I suddenly find myself applying things that I learned in the process of mediation. If there is some issue that we need to face as the community team. So it's interesting.
It is. I mean, it's also, you said you never would have spoken this much English without WordPress, and then you said you were, before we started hit recording, you were part of your local meetup, and the WordCamp, but this year you're not. I mean, I remember I never thought that I would lead a WordCamp, especially Los Angeles, and then now Raleigh, and it's one of those things that you just never see coming. I was like, wow, and I had no preconceived notion of what that meant for me or to me. I just wanted to be helpful, So I mean, a community is a big part. Yeah, I want to ask you another question. So based on your progress here and what you've started with, what you've become, and whatnot, leading and the coordinator of the release, how did that happen, and what was that like? How stressful was that?
Not at all stressful. Honestly.
Interesting.
A lot less work than people think it is.
Okay.
Because once the release model moved from having one release lead and a couple of deputies to getting a team that is actually in charge of releasing WordPress, it's a lot easier because people know what they're doing basically.
Yeah.
So my role as a coordinator was a lot of learning.
Hmm.
So I would say that the majority of my time I spent learning. But in terms of coordinating the team, there wasn't such a big need for me to be, breathing down people's necks, because they more or less knew what they were in there for. So for 5.3, we had a big team. We were over 10 people, I would say, or at least 10 people. And each one of them was absolutely an expert in their own area. And when I say expert, it's a tricky word, expert, I
Hmm.
think, because it makes it sound that only if you have an extensive knowledge of one particular thing you can be involved in this kind of things. But I would say it's mostly about being able to learn and be willing to learn.
Right.
So, we had different people that only two of them, I think, were already involved in past releases, but everyone was very willing to learn. Everyone was very willing to be present. So my job was kind of easy. And I am also co-leading 5.4. And at this point, the machine just goes on basically without me. And so it's not at all stressful. And because the people involved really care about delivering a good product, it's,
Yeah.
it's,
I mean, I thought about volunteering to do that last
you
year.
should. You should.
But here's my concern. I mean, and this, I don't know how this is going to come across, but I was talking to somebody about it. I want to volunteer and help out more, but I also don't want to take any, I'm very aware of my place in the world as a white male.
Oh, okay.
And I want to make sure that everyone
Yeah.
has opportunity, because there are plenty of people
Yeah.
like me. So I'd rather have more,
Yeah.
I want to make sure that that balance is there.
Yes, this is definitely a concern.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that Josepha
Mhm.
Hayden, or Hayden, I never know how to pronounce her last name, who's the executive director of WordPress.org, the open source project, has a dream, which I share 100%, of having a release completely female and non-binary people, led by female and non-binary
Right.
people. Because, as you say, we have a lot of white male developers,
Right.
or white male
Or just men in general. Yeah.
businessmen. Yeah, in general. I think this diversity comes in so many shapes. And so, for example, for me, in 5.3, we had JB Audra, he is a white man, but he comes from France. So that's already, a bit of a cultural shift,
Mhm.
because it's not so American centric. And we had Justin Hanon, who's from Benin, so from Africa, who was in charge of documentation. And we had Riyad Benguela, who's from Algeria. So I have to say that I'm happy that, although I was the only female in the release group, it still wasn't a picture where we all look the same.
Right. And I'm very cognizant of that. I mean, I want to respect that. And so it's a struggle, because I want to help, where I can, but at the same token, I want to make sure everyone else has equal opportunity. Always has been one of my mantras. So
No, it's very considerate.
thank you.
But at the same time, I think it doesn't have to be or
Right.
all the time.
Yeah, exactly. And I can't force it.
Yes, it can be also. I think also, as a white man, you can be an incredible ally for
Right.
women in the team. So I think there's a lot to consider. As I said, Josepha would like to do
All women.
a completely female, all women release. I would love to be part of that. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
This release already, we are doing quite well in terms of diversity, because first of all, we upped the number of women to 3. So, it's already
Yeah.
Score.
Right.
and again, we managed to have someone from Europe involved. So I think there's a lot of
Good.
things
Yeah.
you can see
Yeah,
there.
I mean, my entire, like, the people who do work with me, like the contractors I bring in to do work on projects for the agency, out of the 6 or 7 people I have now, 4 are women.
Yeah.
4 out of the 7. Yeah, so I mean, majority of women, because again, they're qualified and I can afford them, and it doesn't matter. I don't care.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter where they are. I want qualified people who are adults who can do the job.
Yeah.
Who are period. I don't care your gender.
But,
You know.
yes, but sometimes, especially in public spaces and especially in open source and especially in tech, representation is very,
Oh, yeah.
very, very important. So, for example, and everyone always laughs when I say this, but it is true. So, for example, I do a lot of public speaking.
Mhm.
I don't enjoy it at all. Every time I have to give a talk, I'm like, oh, why? Why am I doing this? Why am I putting myself through this? I hate being on stage. Every time I have to speak in English, I'm super, super conscious of, every single word I say. And then I'm like, okay, when I started going at the first WordCamp in Italy, there were very few female and they were all kind of young, So I'm like, all right, first of all, I'm Italian. So obviously in Italy is not a minority, but when I come and speak in the US, it is a minority,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So I'm already representing a different culture than the American culture. Then I'm a woman. Then I'm a woman of a certain age.
Right.
I'm still very young, but I'm not 28. I'm not 28. So there's a number of things that I feel responsible to do.
Yeah.
For other women younger than me that maybe can look up to someone, or older than me that are like, okay, but I can identify with Francesca more than I can identify with a 28 years old.
Right.
So that's
Yeah.
the kind of things that I don't particularly like public speaking, but I do feel the responsibility to bring something to the stage that it's not always the same.
That's good. Yeah. I've heard you speak. I like the way you speak, the accent and the topics. So
Thanks.
of course. All right. So a couple more questions for you. So you mentioned that, before SiteGround, you were doing freelance, work, development, code stuff, whatnot. You had clients, you did 6 years. So when you left, and when you saw the job posting, you applied to do what you're doing now, how did you manage that transition going from owner of your own business with clients to back to a job, if you will, like a normal day job? But what did you do to the clients? How did you find them someone else? How did you manage that?
I was very tired of being on my own.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't stand myself anymore because it was me, myself, and I.
Mm-hmm.
The CEO, the designer, the developer, the customer acquisition, the customer service, the accounting. When luckily my clients paid in time all the time, but I still had needed to do invoicing and check the bank accounts. And at that point, I really wasn't into it anymore. What at the beginning of having my business was like, oh, I made it and my independence and everything. I really missed the team. I really missed every time I had to make a decision about something and do it on my own and question if I made the right decision. I really, really needed someone to say, hey, what do you think? Should I do this?
Right.
Is this the right thing to do?
It's lonely. Running your own business is lonely.
It's very lonely.
But then having a business partner can be stressful. It's just that, it's like you need to, you need to have, like the yin and yang, you need the balance. Like somebody could be really good at ideas and somebody could be good at implementation. If you're both good at ideas, nothing gets done.
Yeah. Also, I really thrive in teams. I really like teamwork, and it's an environment where I can learn a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Selfishly,
Mm-hmm.
I prefer always to be in a place where I can learn from people that are better than me. So
what did you tell your clients when you decided to go full time with SiteGround? What did you tell your client base?
It was kind of a longer phase, because before having the interview I interviewed with SiteGround in June, and I still asked to start in September. But already starting from January that year, I knew I wanted to close the business. I knew I wanted to work in an office. At some point, I was even, considering industries that have nothing to do with WordPress. It did at one point, like in January, I said, okay, this year is the year that I close my business, and ideally, I would stay in the WordPress ecosystem. Ideally, I would work for one of the many great companies that make it. But if it's not in the cards and I can do something else, it's also fine. I really needed that change at that point in my career. So in January, I stopped taking clients, and basically between no, I still took some clients in January, some bigger projects that I knew, would take me a few months, and also in terms of cash flow, they were,
right. Right.
good enough to have not a luxurious life, but a good enough life
Right.
until June. But I gave myself until August, until the end of the holidays to find a new job, and I had a plan Z. I don't care if I don't find this kind of ideal job, and I have to go work at the local supermarket or at the at the pub down the street, I would do it, because I needed the change so much,
Right.
that of course plan A was a great job for a great company, but sometimes things just don't align. And as you said, with SiteGround, you had this thing that both sides wanted to do that, but it was just wasn't the right time.
Right.
So okay, if cards don't align, I have absolutely no problem going to a job that is completely different, that people might even consider as not fancy enough, because I don't care. At the end of the day, I just want to provide for my family, do
Right.
some job, don't be on my own all the time and worried sick all the time about my business, and that's it.
Yeah, makes sense. It makes sense. It's tough. I mean, this version of my agency is 3.5 years old. I've had conversations. I've had people offer jobs. I'm not looking for a job. I'm open to opportunity. We talked about something 6 months, a year ago at SiteGround. It's timing. It's one of those things. It's just, I still like what I do most of the time. If and when something pops up on my radar, I'll deal with it then. We'll see what happens. But all right. So last questions for you, real quick. Actually, I do want to ask about your day to day. What is your day to day now? I mean, doing community manager, what's the day to day look like?
Okay, it looks different every day. First of all, it looks like a lot of airports.
Okay.
Because I travel a lot. So I attend on behalf of SiteGround a lot of events around the world. My focus is mostly the US and Europe.
Okay.
But, I sometimes hop off to Asia, like I will do at the end of February for WordCamp Asia, the first WordCamp Asia. So there's a lot of traveling. So there's a lot of attending conferences, speaking at conferences. If we have a booth, I'm always happy to staff the booth, because very interesting conversations happen there. I have 2 days a week sponsored to contribute to WordPress. So we're very flexible on it. If like the week before the release, if I have to work every day on the release, I'll do that. And then if there's nothing for me to contribute to the same week, then I will do my SiteGround job. My SiteGround job when I'm not traveling is also very, very varied. So it could be doing research on upcoming events, setting up meetings with people that we are interested in exploring a relationship with, writing.
So a little bit of everything.
Yes.
A little bit of everything.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Nice. All right.
Yes.
Interesting. I'm always fascinated to hear people's day-to-day jobs within the space or even outside, using WordPress, but not in what we do. So.
Yeah.
All right. So last question for you, which you already know. I preface this one. What are the 3 tools? People like to know the tools that other people use. What are the 3 tools you use on a daily basis that you can't live without?
Okay, so WordPress.
Okay.
No, not true. I don't use WordPress every day.
Right.
That's a lie. That's a complete lie. I don't use WordPress every day. Work tools would be Slack, unfortunately.
Yep.
I'm not a big fan of Slack. I think we moved the conversation out of the inbox and we just created a lot more noise.
Right.
So I am not a big fan of Slack, but I do use it every day. I use Trello every day, and I use Jira every day. Those are 3 professional tools that I use. In my personal life, it would be Streaks. It's an app to keep track of your habits or something that you have to do every day. So that's, I think, the most used app in my phone. So those will be the thing. And if I think of WordPress, I would say this is a bit of a plug, but it's a honest, because I saw the difference plug. SiteGround created a plugin that it's called the SG Optimizer.
Oh yeah.
Which is a performance plugin that basically does a lot of things. So with one plugin, you solve a lot of problems. I use members. I just read that Justin Tadlock solved it today.
I saw something come up on that on my feed. Yeah.
Yeah. So I use members because I manage a blog that has 80 authors. So obviously that's a big thing. So for WordPress is the SG Optimizer, members, and FacetWP for the same reason that I use members, is to manage this big blog.
Nice. Very cool. Well, I want to be respectful of your time, and I thank you so much for coming on the show. I always love talking to you. It's always informational.
Yeah, it's fun. I like it. I'm very happy that you had me on the show, because I do enjoy our chat, and I'm sorry that I won't see you in Phoenix this year, but hopefully I'll see you at another WordCamp.
I think
soon
Santa Clarita, I believe, is what we'll see each other.
Santa Clarita, yes.
Where can people follow you if they want to follow you online? Where can people find you?
Mostly on Twitter.
Okay.
Where I rant a lot.
I'll link to that in the show notes as well.
Yes, well, I'll share pictures of ducks and the occasional curse word, both in Italian and English. And it's Francesca Marano.
Okay.
It's my name, so you can follow me there. It's the only place where I'm active. And if you want to have information about the community team or core or Beyonce, you can find me also on Slack on the WordPress.org Slack instance as Francina, which I will write down how to write it, because it's a different notation than in English.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks again so much, and I'll see you in the near future somewhere out at a WordCamp.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thanks. All right, and we're back, and that was awesome. Like I said, Francesca is really cool. Hoping to see her. Well, I will see her probably in Southern California back in coming up in April. So, all right, moving on. Segment 3, tip and tool of the week. This week's tool, I suppose, and tip. It's called FakerPress. It's pretty cool. I was actually looking for something like this not too long ago. It lets you, when you install new content, a new website, you can go ahead and have a ton of new posts, custom post types, metadata, featured image, users, tags, categories. It's just a lot of dummy content where you normally have to do that manually. This does it for you. Pretty darn cool. It's free. It looks like it was updated 3 months ago. 10,000 active installations already. So pretty cool. Check it over. It's a link in the show notes, but it's called FakerPress. So there you go. All right, that is this week's show. If you have any questions, go ahead and send it in via email. Adam@KitchensinkWP.com. Use the SpeakPipe function on the website. You can support the show by becoming a Patreon. You can also buy me a coffee. Thanks. Hey, Guy. Thank you for the coffees. That was awesome. That's over at buymeacoffee.com/KitchensinkWP, I believe. You can sponsor the show and now go out and do some awesome things with WordPress. We'll see you next week. All right. Bye-bye.